Welcome to our kitchen. Today we prepare an ancient Roman recipe. A very interesting and flavorful dessert. A sort of porridge with nuts and spelt. We start with the ingredients. We need a spelt, dry white wine, raisin wine, a bit of garum or just a pinch of salt. We talk later about it. Honey and the nuts, pine nuts, hazelnuts and walnuts. Walnuts and more frequently pine nuts are used in ancient Roman cuisine, not just for their flavor, but also as thickeners. Mixed with spelt, they will give a creamy texture to the dish. And then we need black pepper and rue. If you don't have a rue, you can substitute it with another aromatic herb, or just skip this ingredient. First, we boil the spelt. The cooking time depends on the variety you use. We need to overcook it, so we're using a good amount of water. Then we toast the hazelnuts. While we often find walnuts and pine nuts in ancient Roman recipes, hazelnuts are uncommon, even if Pliny reports that hazelnut trees were cultivated in Italy. In this recipe, they are slightly crushed and sprinkled on the finished dish. Walnuts and pine nuts instead are pounded in the mortar. This recipe is part of the cookbook, conventional attributed to Apicius. There are a few dessert recipes, called dulcia domestica, that can be translated as homemade sweets, in contrast with the more common sweets made by bakers. We slightly crush the hazelnuts in the mortar and keep them aside. Now we grind in the mortar black pepper, pine nuts and walnuts. The original recipe doesn't use pepper, but a type of garum spiced with pepper called piperatum. We substituted it with garum and black pepper, following the suggestion Apicius provides in another passage of his book. The author, as usual in ancient cookbooks, doesn't write precise instructions about the method. For example, it doesn't tell us to pound walnuts and pine nuts, but it specifies to add hazelnuts just crushed. And based on how he uses pine nuts and walnuts in other recipes, there is no doubt about how to proceed with the preparation. Then we mince the rue. Rue, with its aromatic and slightly bitter flavor, adds an interesting complexity to the dish. We suggest using just a few leaves, not to overpower the other flavors. We add the minced rue in the mortar and pound it to release all its aroma. Rue is one of the most used herbs in ancient Roman cuisine. It's quite common as a wild plant in many Italian regions, but it is difficult to buy in grocery stores. We cultivate a few plants in our aromatic garden. When the spelt is cooked, we let it cool and pound it in the mortar. The author calls this cereal alica. It's not always easy to identify ancient cereal varieties. Latin has several words for cereals like spelt, emmer, and acorn. We can know for sure if alica is one of those cereals, or its equivalent to the Italian word farro, a word that identifies different cereal varieties, similar in taste and appearance. It's interesting to notice that the word alica is used not just for the cereal grains. Other Latin authors use this word for a preparation of crushed grains or a type of beer, both made with this cereal. We don't need to completely mash it, but we must pound it enough so that it will absorb all the liquid ingredients, creating a creamy, flavorful dessert. We add to the spelt the ground nuts, pepper and rue, and then all the liquid ingredients: honey, garum, raisin wine and white wine. We suggest adding the ingredients a little at a time to adjust the sweetness and the consistency of the dish. If you don't have a garum, you can substitute it with just a pinch of salt. Apicius here is aiming at a balance between sapidity and sweetness, according to ancient Roman cuisine habits. Garum was a fish sauce widely used by ancient Mediterranean populations. There are a few historical sources that describe its production. It was made with fish and salt, sometimes adding aromatic herbs and spices. Today, there are a few producers of garum. If you don't find it, you can substitute it with a Southeast Asian fish sauce. They are produced in the same way as some types of garum. We let the mix rest for a few minutes to allow it to absorb all the residual liquids, so that it will have a firmer consistency. We plate sprinkling the toasted hazelnuts. This creamy and flavorful dessert is a delicious way to end an ancient Roman banquet. If you're interested in ancient foods and flavors, or you're just looking for unusual and delicious recipes, please subscribe our channel.